You think you control your brain. You decide to check your phone. You choose to procrastinate. You fall in love on purpose. You tell a lie because you want to. But here's the truth. Most of the time, your brain is running complex, invisible programs underneath your conscious awareness. Programs you didn't install, barely understand, and definitely don't control. Every common behavior you do, scrolling, procrastinating, overthinking, lying, multitasking, even falling in love, is driven by specific brain networks, firing in patterns neuroscientists can now map in real time. Today, you're going to see exactly what your brain is actually doing during 10 behaviors you do all the time. Let's start with number 10. Number 10, when you scroll social media, your brain becomes a dopamine slot machine. You open Instagram, TikTok, or Twitter, just for a second. An hour later, you're still there. What happened? Your brain's reward system, the nucleus accumbens, ventral tegmental area, and striatum, lit up like a casino. Studies using brain imaging show that scrolling through social media activates the same dopamine-rich regions as gambling, drugs, and alcohol. Every time you scroll and find something mildly interesting, a funny video, a like, a comment, your brain releases a small hit of dopamine. Here's the cruel part. Social media uses variable reward schedules, meaning you never know when the next reward is coming. That unpredictability makes the behavior even more addictive, just like a slot machine. Neuroscientists describe how heavy social media use leads to neural pruning. Your brain literally trims connections to make the dopamine pathway faster and more automatic. That sounds efficient, but it's not. It makes you more impulsive, less able to resist the urge to scroll, and over time can shrink regions like the amygdala and nucleus accumbens that regulate emotions and decisions. Meanwhile, your brain's default mode network, the system active when you're reflecting, planning, or being creative, gets disrupted. So when you say, "I'll just check for a minute," what's actually happening is your brain is chasing unpredictable dopamine hits, reinforcing a habit loop, pruning your self-control circuits, and disrupting the networks you need for focus and emotional regulation. You're not weak. You're up against a system designed to exploit your brain's reward wiring. Number 9. When you procrastinate, your emotional brain hijacks your rational brain. You know you should start the task. You want to start the task. But somehow, you don't. Inside your brain, a war is happening between two systems. On one side, your prefrontal cortex, the rational planner sitting at the front of your brain, responsible for decision-making, goal-setting, and impulse control. On the other side, your limbic system, especially the amygdala, your emotional alarm system that flags anything uncomfortable, boring, or anxiety-inducing as a threat. When you face an unpleasant task, your amygdala fires up, triggering feelings of fear, discomfort, or stress. Your brain then does something sneaky. It chooses the behavior that makes the bad feeling go away right now, even if that behavior hurts you later. Neuroscience research shows that people who procrastinate more have weaker connections between the caudate nucleus, part of the reward system, and the prefrontal cortex, making it harder to regulate emotions and stay on task. Increased activity in the amygdala and insula when they think about starting a difficult task, flooding them with negative emotions. Reduced gray matter in the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for top-down control over impulses. One major study found that punishment sensitivity, how much you dread negative outcomes, completely mediated the relationship between brain connectivity and procrastination. Translation: if your brain is wired to feel threatened by tasks, your emotional system overpowers your rational one, and procrastination becomes the default escape route. You're not lazy. Your amygdala is treating your to-do list like a predator, and your prefrontal cortex is losing the fight to calm it down. Number 8. When you overthink, your default mode, network gets stuck in a loop. You lie awake replaying a conversation. You analyze every mistake you've ever made. You imagine disaster scenarios that haven't happened yet. That's not just who you are. That's your default mode network, DMN, spinning out of control. The DMN is a constellation of brain regions: medial prefrontal cortex, posterior cingulate cortex, precuneus, that activate when your mind isn't focused on an external task. In a healthy brain, the DMN supports useful things like reflecting on experiences, planning for the future, understanding social dynamics, constructing your sense of self. But when the DMN becomes overactive and dysregulated, that reflection turns into rumination, repetitive, negative, self-focused thinking. Brain imaging studies consistently show that people with depression and anxiety have elevated DMN activation, especially during ruminative episodes. Here's the vicious cycle. Your amygdala, emotional alarm, fires when it detects a threat, real or imagined. The DMN uses that alarm to spin up detailed, negative stories. I'm a failure. Everyone judges me. Nothing will ever change. Those stories keep the amygdala on edge, which feeds more rumination. Research shows that in people at risk for depression, the DMN activates more strongly after hearing criticism, and that activation is directly correlated with how much they ruminate. Meanwhile, the frontoparietal network, the system that helps you focus, plan, and control attention, gets suppressed. The two networks operate like a seesaw. When the DMN is high, ruminating, the frontoparietal network is low, can't focus or break the loop. Neuroscientists describe overthinking as a learned mental habit. The more you ruminate, the stronger those neural pathways become, making the pattern progressively more automatic. Your brain isn't broken. It's just stuck in a feedback loop where your default mode network writes disaster scripts, and your attention system can't turn them off. Number 7. When you fall in love. Your brain treats it like a drug addiction. You meet someone. Suddenly, you can't stop thinking about them. Your heart races. You feel euphoric. You do wildly irrational things. That's not magic. That's your brain flooding itself with the same chemicals involved in reward, addiction, and obsession. Brain imaging studies show that when you look at a photo of someone you're in love with, multiple dopamine-rich areas light up, especially the caudate nucleus and ventral tegmental area, core parts of the brain's reward system. These are the same regions activated by cocaine, alcohol, and gambling. In the early stages of romantic love, your brain also releases dopamine, creating feelings of pleasure, motivation, and focused attention on your love interest. Oxytocin and vasopressin, bonding hormones released during physical touch and intimacy, reinforcing attachment. Cortisol, the stress hormone, which spikes as your body treats falling in love as a crisis that needs managing. And here's the twist. Serotonin levels drop during early love. Low serotonin is associated with intrusive, obsessive thoughts, which is why you can't stop thinking about them, checking your phone, or replaying conversations. Neuroscientists literally describe early romantic love as producing brain activity patterns similar to obsessive-compulsive behavior. As relationships mature, the brain shifts. Dopamine hits stabilize oxytocin, and vasopressin increase, deepening attachment. Cortisol and adrenaline normalize as you feel secure. Interestingly, people who describe themselves as madly in love with long-term partners still show high dopamine activity and reward pathways, but also increased calming activity in brain regions rich in opioid and oxytocin receptors. So when you say, "I'm addicted to this person," your brain would agree. You are literally experiencing reward system hijacking, obsessive thought patterns, and chemical bonding mechanisms designed to keep you close to your mate. Love isn't just an emotion. It's a full system neurochemical takeover. Number 6. When you lie. your prefrontal cortex works. Over time, you tell a lie. Maybe it's small. I'm fine. Maybe it's big. A whole fabricated story. Either way, your brain is doing something much more complex than telling the truth. Neuroimaging studies using fMRI and PET scans consistently show that lying activates the prefrontal cortex far more than truth-telling does. Specifically, regions like the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, involved in executive functions, working memory, and inhibiting automatic responses. Anterior prefrontal cortex, engaged in both producing lies and managing the intent to deceive. Ventromedial prefrontal cortex and amygdala, active when you're emotionally processing the deception or monitoring the other person's reaction. Why does lying require so much brain power? Because it involves multiple cognitive tasks at once: suppressing the true response, inhibition, constructing a false narrative, creativity and working memory, monitoring the other person's beliefs, mentalizing and theory of mind, keeping your story consistent, executive control. Research shows that the anterior prefrontal cortex activates both when you produce a lie and when you tell the truth with the intent to deceive, meaning the brain region tracks your intention, not just the words. One fascinating study found that telling the truth to deceive someone, e.g., saying something true but misleading, activates the prefrontal cortex more than telling the truth without deceptive intent. In other words, it's not the lie itself that lights up your brain. It's the effort to manipulate someone else's understanding of reality. So when you say lying is easy, your prefrontal cortex disagrees. It's burning extra cognitive fuel to suppress, construct, monitor, and maintain the deception. Truth is your brain's default. Lying is an expensive override. Number 5, when you multitask. Your brain isn't multitasking, it's hemorrhaging efficiency. You're on a Zoom call while answering emails and texting a friend. You feel productive. You're not. Your brain cannot actually do multiple cognitively demanding tasks at the same time. What you think of as multitasking is actually rapid task switching, and every switch comes with a cost. Neuroscientists call this the switch cost. Research shows that every time you shift attention from one task to another, your brain's frontoparietal control network and dorsal attention network activate more intensely just to manage the switch itself. Before you've even done any work, you experience attention residue. Mental impressions from the previous task linger and lower your performance on the next one. You lose focus for an average of 15-23 minutes after each interruption. Studies estimate that task switching can cost up to 40% of your productive time. Not 40% reduction in quality, but 40% of actual time lost just to the cognitive overhead of switching. That means if you're working an 8-hour day with constant interruptions, you're potentially losing over 3 hours just to the neurological tax of context shifting. And it gets worse. Tasks take longer when interrupted error rates increase, memory and comprehension drop. Mental fatigue accumulates faster. One study even found that switching between different cognitive strategies for the same task still causes significant switch costs, meaning even if the goal stays the same, changing how you think about it drains resources. Your brain evolved to focus deeply on one thing at a time. When you force it to juggle, it doesn't get better at juggling. It just gets worse at everything. So when you feel busy multitasking, what's actually happening is your brain is burning energy switching contexts, leaving attention residue everywhere, losing 40% of your time to cognitive overhead, and producing lower quality work across the board. You're not multitasking. You're systematically degrading your own performance. Number 4, when you doom scroll. Your brain thinks it's solving a problem. You pick up your phone and start scrolling through bad news. War, disasters, outrage, injustice. You feel awful, but you keep scrolling. Why? Because your brain is treating information gathering as a safety behavior. When you're anxious or uncertain, your brain's threat detection system, the amygdala, goes hunting for information to predict and prepare for danger. Doomscrolling feels like you're staying informed or being responsible. But neuroscientists describe it as activating the same dopamine-driven feedback loop as other compulsive behaviors. Even though scrolling through negative content leads to feelings of depression and anxiety, it also triggers dopamine release, which your brain interprets as, "This behavior is important. Keep doing it." The more you scroll, the more dopamine reinforces the behavior, even as your mood crashes. Research shows that higher doom scrolling is linked with greater psychological distress, lower mental well-being and life satisfaction, increased existential anxiety, distrust, and despair. One study suggested that constant exposure to negative feeds creates a state similar to vicarious trauma, your nervous system responding as if you personally experienced the crises you're reading about. Your default mode network also gets involved, spinning up disaster narratives and worst-case scenarios that keep your amygdala on high alert. The vicious cycle looks like this. Anxiety. Scroll for information. Dopamine hit plus worse mood. More anxiety. More scrolling. Your brain thinks it's solving the problem of uncertainty by gathering data. In reality, it's training itself to use fear and outrage as a dopamine delivery system. Number 3. When you people please, your brain is running a survival program. You say yes when you want to say no. You apologize constantly. You prioritize everyone else's comfort over your own. Your brain isn't being nice. It's running an unconscious threat avoidance program learned early in life. People-pleasing is often rooted in environments where asserting needs, setting boundaries, or saying no led to rejection, punishment, or withdrawal of love. Your brain learned conflict, danger, disapproval, abandonment, saying no, loss of safety. So it automated a response. Scan the room for what others want, perform that, avoid rejection. Neurologically, this involves amygdala activation, treating social disapproval as a survival threat, prefrontal cortex override, suppressing your own needs to manage others' emotions, weak connectivity in circuits that support autonomy and self-assertion. Clinicians note that chronic people-pleasing is linked with low self-worth and high anxiety, resentment and burnout, difficulty identifying what you actually want, erosion of personal identity. Your brain isn't trying to make you a doormat. It's trying to keep you alive using a strategy that once worked but now quietly destroys you. Number 2. When you check your phone. Constantly. Your brain is seeking emotional regulation. You feel bored, anxious, sad, lonely. Your hand reaches for your phone before you even consciously decide to. That's not a habit. That's your brain using your smartphone as an external emotional regulation tool. Studies show that problematic smartphone use is strongly associated with higher depression and anxiety, greater stress and loneliness, poor sleep and lower life satisfaction. One recent study found that smartphone addiction increases negative emotions, especially depression, which then lowers life satisfaction, creating a feedback loop. Why does your brain turn to the phone? Because it provides instant dopamine from notifications, likes, and new content, distraction from uncomfortable feelings, social connection, or the illusion of it, control in a chaotic world. Heavy smartphone use also disrupts your default mode network, the system that helps you reflect, process emotions, and regulate your sense of self. Over time, your brain stops learning how to internally soothe discomfort, and instead outsources that job to the device. The pattern becomes automatic. Bad feeling, phone, temporary relief, worse baseline mood, more phone dependency. You're not addicted to your phone. Your brain has learned to use it as a crutch for emotions it no longer knows how to handle alone. Number 1. When you do anything. Your brain is predicting, not just reacting. Here's the most important thing to understand about your brain. It doesn't just react to the world. It constantly predicts what will happen next and updates those predictions when it's wrong. This is called predictive processing, or the reward prediction error framework. Your dopamine neurons are constantly comparing what you expected to happen, what actually happened. When reality is better than expected, dopamine spike. Do more of that. When reality matches expectations, no dopamine change. Behavior becomes stable. When reality is worse than expected, dopamine dip. Avoid that. This mechanism doesn't just govern rewards like food or money. It shapes everything. How you interpret social cues, how you feel about your day, what habits you form, even your sense of fairness. You're not experiencing life as it is. You're experiencing life as the gap between what you predicted and what occurred. That's why getting $50 when you expected nothing feels amazing. Getting $50 when you expected $500 feels like an insult. The same event can feel completely different depending on your prior expectations. Your entire emotional life is anchored to invisible predictions. Your brain is making thousands of times a day. When you understand this, behavior stops being mysterious. You scroll because your brain predicts unpredictable rewards. You procrastinate because your brain predicts the task will feel bad. You overthink because your brain predicted danger and is searching for confirmation. You fall in love because your brain's reward system predicts this person will make you feel good. Every behavior is your brain running predictions, calculating errors, and reinforcing or revising its models of the world. You are not just deciding. You are a prediction engine constantly updating itself based on what pays off and what doesn't. Conclusion: your brain is doing more than you think. Let's recap what your brain is actually doing. Scrolling. Chasing dopamine in a variable reward loop. Pruning self-control circuits. Procrastinating. Amygdala hijacking prefrontal cortex. Treating tasks as threats. Overthinking. Default mode network stuck in rumination. Suppressing attention systems. Falling in love. Flooding reward pathways with dopamine, oxytocin, and dropping serotonin into obsession range. Lying. Prefrontal cortex working overtime to suppress truth, construct fiction, and monitor deception. Multitasking, hemorrhaging. 40% of productivity to task switching costs and attention residue. Doomscrolling. Using negative information as a dopamine-driven pseudo-solution to anxiety. People-pleasing. Running an amygdala-driven survival program to avoid rejection. Phone checking. Outsourcing emotional regulation to a device. Disrupting your default mode network. Everything. Constantly predicting outcomes and updating based on reward prediction errors. None of this is random. None of it is a character flaw. Your brain is doing exactly what evolution and experience taught it to do. Chase rewards, avoid threats. Automate what works. Predict what's next. The problem is that modern life, smartphones, social media, information overload, chronic stress, has hijacked systems designed for survival in a very different world. The good news? Once you see what your brain is actually doing, you can start working with it instead of against it. Want to stop doom scrolling? Recognize the dopamine trap and design better reward structures. Want to beat procrastination? Calm your amygdala by breaking tasks into less threatening pieces. Want to stop overthinking? Interrupt the default mode loop with focused attention exercises. Want healthier phone habits? Rebuild internal emotional regulation so you don't need the device as a crutch. You'll never fully control your brain, but you can stop being confused by it. If this changed how you see your own behavior, hit like, subscribe for more neuroscience breakdowns of everyday life, and tell me in the comments, which behavior surprised you the most when you saw what your brain was actually doing underneath it?